podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Humans of Speedway podcast, where we chat to some of the stars of the sport, both on and off the track. I'm Ian Brannan, and a bit like my next guest in this episode, I watched Speedway as a youngster and eventually went into broadcasting and the media. Whereas I played records and did the occasional football phone-in on radio stations, this human of Speedway who joins me now went on to become the voice of British Speedway and the GP series. You've welcomed him into your home to commentate on every GP over the past 10 years, as well as countless iconic moments in domestic Speedway. Oh, and he's also got his own podcast alongside his sparring partner in the commentary box, Kelvin Tatum. The Tatum and Pearson podcast is a great listen too, but it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the Humans of Speedway podcast, Nigel Pearson.
Ian, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. It's great to catch up with you. It was weird calling you yesterday and you hear this voice coming down the phone and it's like, this is the guy off the Speedway and the darts and everything.
I don't always talk like that, you know. I do have a natural voice away from the microphone. I really do. A bit like you, Ian, with your presenter voice on, your voiceover. This is Ian Brannan on Real Radio.
There's a flashback.
I was a fan of yours back in the day.
Oh, wow. This is like a mutual appreciation society. Anyway, on to where we're at right now. We're in May, and this is a time of year that you would usually be mega busy, but you're not. You're at home.
Oh, absolutely. May, June time. I mean, May's ridiculous for me because obviously I work in three sports, the football, the darts and the Speedway. And May was going to be Latvia, Bellevue, obviously the Speedway of Nations, Germany, Landshut, and also the Grand Prix in Warsaw, the first Grand Prix of the year. So that would have been hectic. Premier League darts would have been reaching a conclusion. The football season would have been over by now. To go from that to actually being sat at home for a while and with all this time is quite bizarre, really. And I don't really want to go through it again, if I'm honest.
No, it's an experience, and I think we've learnt a few things about ourselves and the world, but it's not something you want to make an annual event.
No, certainly not. I think we can learn from it. You know, I walk through my village and, you know, whereas previously you just get on with your daily walk, your daily life, you know, it's nice that people speak to each other. Morning,
yeah.
You know, and that never used to happen, you know, so it helps when the sun's shining. It'd be nice to think that we can all be nicer people and more chilled out about life. But I don't know. When everything gets back to normal, you know, we'll all be in a rush to get back to how it was. But we'll see.
Are you going to have possibly a very busy end to the year, though, as a result? Because they're on about reorganising some of this stuff, aren't they?
Very much so. You know, they've already reorganised the Monster Energy FIM Speedway of Nations to give it its correct title for the end of October. And also the information that I'm getting or the information and opinion, is that it could be a very hectic September, October, because there could well be, you know, the Grand Prix crammed into September, October. We know Voyens is scheduled in September. They've rescheduled Prague for September. There'll be a couple of Torun's already scheduled for October. Yeah. So there's three. So that'll be hectic on the Grand Prix scene. But also, you know, I still remain hopeful that by the middle of August, some sort of British League racing can take place. So hopefully, you know, that's going to be busy as well. And then there's the football question, because I've already been asked, you know, about my availability and willingness to work in behind closed doors situations for radio. So yes, it could well be that we could go from from zero to absolute chaos in terms of a diary. So let's see. I hope so. Any kind of sport, just get me out of here.
Speedway does kind of lend itself to social distancing in a way, though, doesn't it? Because, you know, the riders are obviously well protected when they're out on the track, so they're not in contact with each other in that way. But also the stadiums, you know, with the best will in the world, the GPs aside, most league meetings, you know, you could probably spread things out around the stadiums a bit more than maybe they do at the moment in some places.
Easily. I mean, you look at arenas like Kings Lynn, Peterborough, you look at Leicester, you look at Scunthorpe, you know, all across the various levels of the sport. And even in grandstands, you know, crowds tend to sort of congregate as close towards the start-finish line as they can. Well, they're going to have to get used to the new normal of spreading out. There is potential there. And Speedway can present its case to government officials, and social distancing, I'm sure there'll be stewards at the turnstiles to ensure that social distancing measures are adhered to. And I noticed recently, I noticed a report that there are serious question marks for the economy about the 2-metre rule. And the World Health Organization recommends 1 metre, I'm led to believe. So that could be brought into question by the time Speedway gets going. Maybe it's only 1 metre or 1.5 metres. So, and that affects all forms of businesses, doesn't it? And to answer your question, I do believe Speedway can adapt and can continue racing at the first available opportunity.
And of course, that's what everybody wants, the fans, but not least the riders, because, that is their bread and butter and their income to get out there racing. And some of them have been forced, I've seen, to take up alternative careers in the meantime.
Wow, yeah. Nikolai Clint, I spoke to him on the phone. Nikolai's delivering for Tesco.
Yeah.
I noticed in the Speedway Star magazine as well that Ricky Wells, who of course has ridden in the World Cup for America, is now working in an Amazon warehouse in Doncaster. Wow. I mean, these are remarkable stories, aren't they? Yeah. Kyle Bickley, I believe, is working at Morrison's supermarket. And fair play to these lads for getting off their backside and replacing their lost income with a little bit of money coming in. And fair play to them. I like to see hardworking people. And they're self-employed. They can't be furloughed or anything like that by their clubs. They get paid per point. So, they have to go out and replace the income somehow, some way. And I admire that. I know riders have got some sponsors that have given them a job as well. So fair play, lads, I say.
Ultimately, you've got to put bread on the table, haven't you? And, I think all power to their elbow for going out there and helping out other people, but also helping out themselves as well.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the chat with Nikolai. He's a good lad, Nikolai Clint, and he's got his head screwed on. And when I was talking to him, I was asking him questions. He said, "Why, are you after a job with Tesco then, Nige?" And you imagine knocking on the door. "Hi, here's your delivery. There you go. Enjoy." Just to keep the old vocal cords going,
You could rent yourself out just to commentate on people's everyday happenings in their life.
Here comes Clint now in the van, turns left into the cul-de-sac, and now rings the doorbell. Sensational delivery by Nikolai Clint.
Fantastic. Definitely something there. Let's take you back to the start, though, because on Humans of Speedway, what we want to do is get a bit of the history of how people found their way into the sport, not necessarily the riders. And in your case, you have become the voice of Speedway for probably an entire generation of people by now. And that's the present, but obviously you were a big Speedway fan as a youngster too.
Still living the dream, really, Ian, for me, because... I used to live in Selby, a little village outside Selby called Thorpe Willoughby in North Yorkshire, in between Leeds and York.
Yeah.
And that's where I spent the first years of my life until my father got a job down back in the West Midlands, which is where he's always been from originally anyway, hence the West Bromwich Albion link. And we moved down to the West Midlands when in the early 80s. Now, the first years of my life were spent going to Hull Speedway, watching the Vikings at the Boulevard. But also, once a month, we'd come down to my grandparents in the West Midlands at Cradley Heath and go to Cradley. And also, as an occasional treat on a Saturday, Dad would take me to the Shay to watch Halifax. On a Thursday, he'd take me to Owlerton to watch Sheffield. And on the odd occasion, he'd take me to Quibble Park to watch Scunthorpe as well. And I was gripped by it, absolutely gripped by it. Every Wednesday at the Boulevard, first thing I'd do after going through the turnstiles, would go to the club shop. Dad would allow me one photograph per week of a rider, Bobby Beaton, Ivan Major, Joe Owen, Graham Drury, Frank Orfrit, whoever. Then we'd get the programme. Dad wouldn't let me on the race card until I think I was about 9 or 10. So he filled the programming because I was 6 when I went to the first meeting. And I was absolutely gripped by Speedway, Ian, and to the extent that, I talked school colleagues to boredom really about it because they weren't interested. All they wanted to talk about was football and rugby. And I was talking to them about Speedway. Colleagues at school, fellow pupils at school had got posters of Kevin Keegan and Eddie Gray up on their bedroom wall. I'd got Bobby Beaton and Ivan Major on my wall. And I just loved it. And it's still in the blood now. And my 10-year-old son Liam, I took him to the British final at Bellevue last year. He went in the club shop and got a Bellevue replica jersey. I took him a lap of the track, gave him a walk of the track. He absolutely loved it. And I know that's privileged because of who I am. But he sat next to me in the commentary box at the British final with Ty Woffenden on my left, Kelvin Tatum on my right, and Liam sat next to Ty.
Wow.
And what an experience that was for my boy. And I'm hoping that he may be tempted away from the iPad and the PS4 and the Switch and maybe enjoy a bit of live speedway more often when we can get going again, Ian.
There is something about it, isn't there? I think there's the smell, there's the excitement of watching the bikes warming up at the start. It's sort of a whole occasion, maybe a little bit more than, say, football. You go in there, you watch the match, and you're out again. There's more aspects to it, isn't there? In some way.
Bikes warming up, the music over the tannoy, you know, that's something that promoters these days have to take more seriously as well is meeting presentation, in my opinion. You know, find the right music as a balance for your older fans and younger fans, you know. If we're trying to get a new generation of supporters into Speedway, we need decent sound systems and we need decent music and we need professional presentation. So that needs to be taken more seriously. But no, it was all part of it, Ian. As you say, the all-round package of the music, the smell of the bikes warming up, the noise of the bikes warming up, the parade music, the riders coming out and waving to the crowd. And it's all part of that package. And you know, I love to see clubs that make an effort with the kids, you know, Swindon, Wolverhampton, Birmingham. You know, the kids come out on parade with them, holding the hands of the riders. And that's an experience they'll never, ever forget. So, no, it is the all-round package of Speedway. And, you know, if you've got one race that's pretty processional or boring, you just move on to the next one. And it's not too far away. So, no, it's a great all-round package. And also, you know, TV companies love it. It's tailored for television as well. And, you know, you've got people say British Speedway's on the slide and struggling. Well, you've got two TV companies vying for the rights last season for a 5-year deal.
Wow, and that's a first time that's happened really for a long time, isn't it? In terms of the, you know, a deal of such length and such size for Eurosport.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that BT Sport were there when nobody else was for Speedway. You know,
absolutely.
Sky Sports decided to end their contract 2 years early. I just think they felt that they were moving in other directions with their programming. And I'm delighted. I'm still part of Sky with the dart team, of course, which is a huge honour. And BT were there. And, you know, the sport needs to be grateful to BT. And what Eurosport have come forward with to offer the sport as well is fantastic. So, you know, yes, we can all say that British Speedway is doomed, it's finished, it's on the slide. It's not quite ready to write the obituary for British Speedway just yet. In fact, far from it. And I'm not just saying that with a PR hat on. It's something that I genuinely believe. If it's that poor, if it's that bad, why were TV companies bidding to show the sport for the next 5 years?
What's changed over the years, do you think, with Speedway? Because when we look back at the 1950s, and we sort of briefly mentioned there, let's say, for example, Odsal, it used to be full of 50,000 or more people every week. And it used to be the case around the country. And then it was still very popular, I think, in the, you know, the 70s and the 80s. And
massively,
somewhere along the line, something changed. I mean, was that Speedway's fault, you know, not marketing things right at the right time? Or were people just wooed by glitzier things in their lives?
Well, I'm pretty firm on this, Ian, and pretty consistent in what I say about this. Society has changed. In the 70s, you had no luxurious cinemas. I mean, where I lived in Thorpe Willoughby, I look at Selby back in the 70s and 80s. Where was there for my mum and dad to go out to a nice restaurant? The Owl at Hambleton was all right. But generally then there, Ian, there wasn't so much for people to do. We only had 3 TV channels. Now, you've got the television, the smart TV, you've got luxurious cinemas for a night out, you've got restaurants galore, you've got the retail parks with the likes of your Frankie and Benny's and TGI Fridays. You know what I'm saying, don't you?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
They weren't around in the 70s and 80s. So, to sum it up, Ian, it's a different world now in 2020 to how it was when I went to Hull in 1976 and loved it. Kids have got other things to do. I look at my own kids, you know. We've got to get them away from the iPad, the PS4, the Switch, the whatever else doobry they've got. You know, I played Subbuteo as a kid. Now my lad wants to play Roblox or Fortnite on an electronic gadget, you know. I played Scalextric. You know, I love going to the Speedway. These things have altered. It's a completely different world, and Speedway has suffered. And yes, okay, I'm sure mistakes have been made along the way with the sport, but I believe the Grand Prix now is a better product than any World Final. I was at Wembley in '81 when people say it's the greatest ever World Final. There was 2 good races, Ian. There was 2 good races. I've commentated on Grand Prix meetings at Cardiff, in Poland, and Sweden as well. And the racing has been phenomenal. Last year at Wrocław in Poland, that Grand Prix was one of the best. Kelvin and I agreed afterwards, that was one of the best Grand Prix we've ever commentated on. It's a better product now than even than the halcyon days of the 60s, 70s and 80s one-off World Finals. It's better racing now. And, well, I'll argue that till I'm blue in the face, but, you know, yeah. I genuinely believe that. It's an ever-changing industry, an ever-changing world. But, you know, I can honestly say if I wasn't working in Speedway, I'd still pop along and go and watch it, for sure.
You're listening to the Humans of Speedway podcast. Welcome along. I'm Ian Brannan, and we're in conversation with the voice of British and Grand Prix Speedway, Nigel Pearson. Well, one of them, alongside your legend, Kelvin Tatum. We're talking about his initial history of getting into Speedway as a youngster, visiting every track there is going around Yorkshire, but then a move to the West Midlands beckoned.
Ironic timing, really, Ian, because we moved down to the West Midlands after Hull had closed. Hull were evicted from the Boulevard in '81, and we moved in '82. And in 1983, Cradley had a team that wiped the floor. And I'm talking, I can even remember the riding order off the top of my head. Riding at number 1, Simon Wigg. At number 2, Lance King. 3, Eric Gunderson. 4, Alan Graham. 5, Phil Collins. And down at reserve, Peter Rawn and Jan O. Pedersen. Now, that team wiped the floor, lost 2 league meetings all season, were scoring 50s and 60s every Saturday at Dudley Wood, and the fans loved it. But it was so one-sided. You'd walk to Dudley Wood thinking, on a nice sunny night, brilliant, Cradley versus Hackney tonight. And you knew Cradley were going to hit late 40s, early 50s over a 13-heat format. But the fans loved it, absolutely loved it. And, you know, Gunderson became a hero of mine. And I know we're going to talk about favourite all-time riders, but Gunderson, Eric, they say never meet your heroes. What a legend of a bloke, by the way. He is fantastic as a man. Lovely family. And no, it was remarkable timing Speedway-wise for me that we moved down from Yorkshire and then Cradley started and then I'd go to Cradley every Saturday, Wolverhampton every Monday on the bus from King Swinford, which was probably halfway between Cradley Heath and Wolverhampton. And there was a Speedway special bus that West Midlands Travel put on from King Swinford to Dudley Wood on a Saturday just for the Speedway. Wow. And then Wolverhampton on a Monday after school, get the bus with my mates. There was about 3 or 4 of us, and we'd all go to the Speedway at Wolverhampton. So, because that reopened in '84, Peter Adams moved from Cradley and reopened Wolverhampton in '84. Great times, great times.
A great team as well. I think for me, I guess similar to you, when I used to go watch Bradford, there was that era where Bradford were firing on all cylinders, and same sort of thing. You knew when you turned up that whoever the opposition were going to get absolutely spanked that night.
I think at Odsal, Ian, some visiting riders were probably beaten on the motorway going up or down to Odsal or across. I think some riders were travelling to meetings thinking, we haven't got a chance here. I hate this place. We've got to try and beat Gary Havelock, Joe Screen, Sean Wilson, riders like that, Mark Lorham in '97. We've got to try and beat these riders. And Kelvin agrees with me, and he tells me, he says definitely he noticed looking at the opposition's pits area, riders would arrive at Odsal beaten in their head already.
It was so different to anything else and remains that case even to this day because it's still standing. But it held thousands of people. I remember the World Final in 1990. Thousands of people from all over the world there. An incredible atmosphere.
Yes, I went to both World Finals at Odsal, actually. 1985, won by Eric Gunderson. And that was in a runoff with Hans Nielsen. Cool.
Wow.
I was 15. I was 15 at the time, and I couldn't watch the start because I wanted Eric to win so badly. I was absolutely a bag of nerves. And when he won, I jumped up and down like a madman. and then in '90, Per Jonsson won there as well. Fantastic crowds, fantastic occasions. And the way I see Odsal now, I have noticed a little glimmer of hope. Nothing more than that. that maybe stock cars and Speedway can come together. The track, although it's got the hospitality areas on the third and fourth turn, I do know the Speedway Control Bureau track inspectors passed it for suitable for Speedway again about 3 or 4 years ago.
Wow.
And I know there is interest from a stock car promoter. Also, what the heck are Bradford doing playing at Dewsbury? Come on, get back to Odsal, please. Bradford Bulls need to be back in Bradford, not at Dewsbury. Nothing against Dewsbury at all. But come on, there's a stadium there lying empty. And if you can get 3 sports back in there, why not?
It was always the thing at Odsal, wasn't it? The whole taking the turf up and putting it back down again for rugby. And there must surely be a way, if somebody puts their mind to it, of sorting that out. Especially
with technology in this modern day and age.
Yeah.
You know, there are turf pallets. You know, you can put pallets down. It is possible. I can't believe, you know, that it can't happen. And it's only the corners, really. The rugby league pitch would have to probably come in a little bit. But that's a small price to pay to get the Bulls back to Bradford. Surely.
The Dukes have been keeping you occupied during this lockdown time, though.
I've been producing during this time where I've been sat at home, I've been producing a souvenir programme-style 2020 Dukes publication, actually. And it's had a good response. And I've been writing about my memories of Odsal and the Shay. And I've interviewed Neil Evitts. We've got Gary Havelock lined up for the next one. Kelvin's done a bit about his time at Bradford. And I've done the same with Hull Vikings as well. And I've really enjoyed doing those, reminiscing about the great days at Bradford, Halifax and Hull, and great history. And what they've got in common there, East Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, there is no Speedway in Hull, Bradford or Halifax. How many fans has that cost British Speedway? And maybe that's one of the reasons why viewing figures on TV are so good and people read Speedway Star by subscription or whatever, because they still love Speedway, but they haven't got a track to go to.
I think you make a very good point, and you know they were iconic names as well. I mean, particularly when you talk there about the Dukes. I mean, I know that there were some second half races with a Dukes team, weren't there, a year or two ago? And you know, it was exciting to see the name on the program, even though it was a second half. Meeting really that didn't really mean so much, but it was nice to see the elephant and all that on the race jackets, and the rivalry as well. When you look at Bellevue, you know, the rivalry between Halifax / Bradford and Bellevue, you know, that was one of the big Speedway rivalries as well.
It was, and a little bit like down in the West Midlands now.
Yeah,
Cradley Coventry, Wolverhampton Coventry.
Yeah.
Cradley, Wolverhampton, these local derbies that pulled in huge crowds are no longer taking place. How many fans has that cost British Speedway? No Coventry, no Cradley Heath. You know, how many fans has that cost British Speedway? They are huge misses for British Speedway, in my opinion, and tragic in many ways. And that's why I admire so much the hard work that people are putting in with the modern day sports. I do know how much hard work goes in from people behind the scenes, and it has to be applauded. And anybody who jumps on the back and just does nothing but slag them off really is so out of order. It's unbelievable.
But you have experienced life on that side of the fence as well. You know, you're heavily involved in the Dudley and Cradley Heathens revival. When that came around, you were a chairman and a director. How did that come about, and what have you learnt from that experience?
Where do I start? Don't read social media where people abuse you, slag you off for only doing it to make money. What a load of nonsense. It came about in 2009, 2010. There was a 3-team tournament staged at Swindon with Reading, Oxford, Swindon and Cradley. And there was a crowd of over 2,500 there, I'm led to believe. And I think there were about 500 Cradley fans who travelled. And then there was Billy Hamill's farewell at Wolverhampton. And the terracing was a sea of green, red and white scarves. And Chris Van Stratton got together with Gary Patchett, who was at Birmingham at the time, and it was their idea to put a team in league racing in the National League. Then they came to me. What do you think? Do you want to join us as a promoter, if you like? Do you want to, become part of the club? And I jumped at the chance. Yes, of course. I only had certain time available to put into it, but we did it, and we did it for 10 years. But the frustration of that was we didn't have the support of the local council to try and find a piece of land closer to home. We had a couple of close shaves where we thought we'd hit the jackpot. It didn't happen. And as the years went on, the fans got a little bit more fed up and started turning on us, saying, why are you doing this? You're not making any effort to find a new track. And we were. I had several meetings back in 2014 with Dudley Council, probably 6 or 7 meetings that year. And was that just to waste my time because I wasn't interested and I just wanted to carry on racing at Wolverhampton? No. So that was a learning exercise. It's toughened me up as a person because of all the abuse we got in the end. And some of it became very personal and quite distressing. And all three of us agreed that it just was not worth the hard work that we were putting in. It just was not worth it anymore because we felt that we had no chance of finding a new track. And we felt we'd outstayed our welcome, Ian, really. So quite a lesson, but some great times. We won trophies. We had great riders, great lads working with us who've gone on to have good careers. Paul Stark, Steve Worrell, Ashley Morris, Nathan Greaves, Max Clegg, riders like that who've gone on to have good, solid professional speedway careers. Adam Roynan was with us. Overall, despite what I've said previously, it was a great time and the positives outweighed the negatives. And I'm proud that part of what I've done in life has been to be a director of a speedway club. I'm glad I did it.
And not just that, but a director of a speedway club that you have a massive fondness for as well, personally. Yes,
you know, those great days of Dudley Wood as a fan. And then back in 1990, I was on hospital radio at the time in Dudley. And I got a call from Colin Pratt at Cradley. And he said, our announcer's leaving. Would you like to come and be our announcer at Cradley? And we also need somebody to take over the programme editing. I know you're on hospital radio, and I know that you're working at the local paper, so you can talk and you can write. Do you want to come and have a chat? So in 1990, I became the announcer and programme editor of Cradley Heath. And that was a dream come true. Wow. Absolute dream come true. And I was with them every year until they closed in 1996, in a year at Stoke. And they were evicted from Dudley Wood disgracefully in 1995. And I was with them in the season at Stoke at 96 in the announcer's box. Did the programme, and also I did do you remember Club Call, Ian, where it was like premium rate telephone service?
Yeah.
Coming up in a minute, we're going to hear from Billy Hamill here on the Heathens Club Call 9, but he's going to be talking to us about the wonderful meeting that we had at the weekend against Wolverhampton. But just a reminder, our next home meeting at Dudley Wood is this coming Saturday when we welcome the Coventry Bees in another Midlands derby, 7:30 the start time, and we'll have Colin Pratt previewing that meeting for us later in the week. But in the meantime, let's now hear from Billy Hamill. 60p a minute people pay for that.
Make them hang on.
60p a minute, and the club earned good money out of it. Fair play to them.
I think I used to do my first job in radio, my first job I got paid for anyway, because I did hospital radio like you. And by the way,
yes.
no Speedway promoters ever phoned me when I was there. It was I did AA Roadwatch, did travel news, and one of the jobs was you had to update the premium rate phone line, where you had to speak for something like 3 minutes and just list off every set of roadworks in the north. Update it every hour.
The A19 between Selby and Brayton is struggling right now. Ian Brannan, AA Roadwatch.
That's exactly it. Yeah, I was there. The first broadcast I did on AA Roadwatch was on BBC Radio York, and it was for very much that area you're talking about.
I love it. Great times. We got a lot in common, Ian.
We have very similar roots into it. You're listening to the Humans of Speedway podcast. I'm Ian Brannan, in conversation with the voice of British and GP Speedway around the world, Nigel Pearson. And before the end of this podcast, we're going to put together Nigel's Speedway Paradise, the ultimate team on the ultimate track in the ultimate venue with the ultimate referee. Will Kelvin Tatum make the lineup? That's the big question. We'll find out in the next half hour or so. But Nigel, back to you. Already talked about your first experiences of working in Speedway, announcing and editing the programme at Cradley, but how did your journey into broadcasting and commentating begin?
Yeah, well, back in 1989, I just started my first full-time job as a writer with a newspaper in the West Midlands, County Express Group, which covered Halesowen, Stourbridge and Dudley. And I started as a trainee sports writer, and within 6 months, they promoted me to sports editor. But at the same time, I was doing hospital radio, and I was going to West Bromwich Albion games and covering it for DDHB, Dudley and District Hospital Broadcasting. And at the same time, I sent demo cassettes off, the TDKC 90 and all that. And I sent demo cassettes off to BBC WM, Beacon Radio, and BRMB. I think I did 2 games for WM when they were short, and they gave me an opportunity, which was fantastic. But then George Gavin at BRMB gave me a call and said, how do you fancy Halesowen Town versus Tranmere in the FA Cup on a phone line? So George booked me a phone line at Halesowen, November 89, FA Cup. Still got the programme now. And I did, I think, 8 updates into Saturday Sport with George on BRMB. And then I did every weekend from there on. He just put me as part of the team. And I think within 3 weeks or there or thereabouts, I'd have to Google fixtures that year. But certainly on or around November or December 89, it gave me Manchester United versus Aston Villa at Old Trafford.
Oh, hello.
And I just could not believe it. He rang me, because there's no email then, no text messaging. Hi, Nigel, it's George. Fancy Old Trafford Saturday? Do I? What? Do I? So George gave me that opportunity, and I'd started doing football every weekend, midweek as well. And I remember going to Scarborough versus Walsall on a Tuesday night. Did the rounds, went to all the lower league grounds covering Walsall. That was on BRMB. So that was how the broadcasting started. And then in 96, a guy called Colin Wilshire approached me for Beacon. They were going to revamp their sports coverage and actually start taking it seriously and do contracts with Wolves and West Brom to do commentary deals, which didn't necessarily go down too well with Tom Ross at BRMB at the time, because not only was I moving away, but we were effectively in opposition, even though we were commercial radio together. Obviously, we're trying to build listeners up in Wolverhampton and Shropshire, and Tom and BRMB had exclusivity with Birmingham, Villa, so that's how it moved on to Beacon. So I presented the sports show, I commentated on the sports show, and I did Monday to Friday breakfast sports bulletins from 6 a.m. until 10 a.m.
Wow.
So it was busy, but it was fun. And also after that, then Beacon, I'd just taken out a mortgage, and then Beacon decided to drop sport and get rid of me.
That's commercial radio for you.
There you go, Ian. There you go. I knew that would resonate somewhere. Then Talk Sport was just being launched. I started doing games when it was called Talk Radio back in the day, and then in 2000 they launched Talk Sport. And I asked one of the producers at Talk Sport, what does that mean then? He said, more work for you. So then that kicked on, and I'm still with Talk Sport to this day, 20 years later. And I look back on my time with Talk Sport with great pride, because I've presented, I've commentated, I've read sports bulletins, I've done Formula One coverage. I was the first commentator, the first lead commentator on Talk Sport when they won national commentary, when they won a national commentary contract. Myself and Alvin Martin did a year, and then myself and Stan Collymore.
Wow.
But then the TV had started kicking in, Ian, because I'd started doing Sky Sports Speedway. I was given meetings there, and then the boss of the Sky Sports Speedway team also was the boss of the Sky Sports Darts team. And he knew I'd been a fan of darts, because every time we poked up at a meeting, I'd talk about it. Great Premier League the other night, match play was good. I watched that. That was brilliant. And then one day, we were in a pub somewhere in London, and he just pulled me to one side. Right, Nigel, there's more darts coming in on Sky. Do you fancy a dabble? And then in 2006, I went and did my first darts commentary at the Circus Tavern in Purfleet, in the last World Championship to be held at the Circus Tavern, and I was probably more nervous than I ever have been for anything in my life. And I started then, and I'm still with the Sky Sports Darts team to this day, with a wonderful team of people, and probably do 25 to 30 days of darts per year on the Sky Sports team. Great to be part of that team. So that's, in a nutshell, my broadcast career, how it evolved and where it's at now.
And it's good to have the variety as well, different sports, and you don't just become pigeonholed into one thing. Because, for you, it spreads it out through the whole year, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, the variety, different eggs in different baskets. And as you well know in this industry, Ian, one door closes and you've still got other doors open. So, take it while you can.
If nobody's ever had a go at doing commentary before, and there's no reason that the vast majority of the public would have done, but try having a go at it by putting it on the TV, turning the sound down, and just trying to commentate for a minute or 2 minutes, and you find out how hard it is. It's a very specific skill. I mean, how did you learn your way into that?
I've always backed myself, and I think anybody who wants to be a sports commentator, reporter, whatever, has to have confidence in their own ability, and confidence is what has carried me through, really. I listened to various commentators. I thought one who took a sport out of the dark ages into the modern day era was Eddie Hemmings with the Rugby League. I was a huge fan of Eddie's, and I loved his commentary style. And I decided from that, and listening to some radio commentators, you have to project a strong, authoritative voice. And that's what I try and do. And even though I've got a game in the World Darts Championships between two players that I've never seen play before, and I've only just heard of, if you talk with confidence and authority, you give the viewer the impression that you know everything about it and that you're an expert. I mean, we all prepare anyway with notes. You get your games, and so you get to know what you're going to be commentating on. So you all prepare, but it's important to have a strong, authoritative voice to portray the drama of sport and where we're at in a particular game, in my opinion. And that confidence, I think, Ian, yes, by all means, have a look at the telly, turn the sound off and try and commentate on it. But you've got to be a confident person who backs your own ability. And listening to Eddie Hemmings and other commentators, and I loved George Gavin's presenting style on BRMB. Ian Darke, I'm a massive fan of as a commentator in boxing and football. There's so many talented commentators that I've listened to and learned from, and taken bits of each of those commentators into my own game, really. I was a huge fan of Eddie Waring when I was a kid. Ray French replaced Eddie, and him and Alec Murphy formed a partnership. I'm not decrying them in any way, shape or form, but Eddie Hemmings and Mike Stevenson dragged that sport forward into a new era of Super League on Sky. That is my opinion. Again, I've got to mention my late former darts colleagues, Dave Lanning and Sid Waddell, to have the opportunity for 6 years to sit with those guys in commentary boxes all over the UK and Europe was remarkable. When I went to school, if you'd have told me in future life you're going to sit next to Dave Lanning and Sid Waddell, I'd have gone, you've been drinking. It's just so fantastic to look back, and now the modern day guys in the darts team as well. Wayne Mardle, what a character. And I've done darts on the radio. Paul Nicholson, Chris Mason, all these lads, really great people that we're talking about in terms of their knowledge of darts and their delivery on the radio and television. And there's a lot of talent out there. And I honestly do feel that to take a little bit from each one that you listen to and take it on board, you can still always improve your game. But to any newcomers who want to try it, be confident and take the best bits of people that you've listened to, take them on board, put them into your own game, and improve yourself as much as you can.
Sid Waddell, though, I mean, he was fantastic, wasn't he? I met him once, and but like so many people, I think, just exactly the same off screen as on.
Sid Waddell, what a character! in the commentary box, Ian, right? When I first started, and he never lost this. If he felt there was a gap where he wanted me to talk, he'd punch me on the shoulder. And as the game went on and it got more exciting, the punches got harder. And I came out of the commentary box after a marathon game at the match play once in the World Championship, and I'm sure I had bruises on my shoulder. It was GBH. And that was Sid. Come on, kidder, your turn, kidder. He'd put the microphone on the desk and just punch you in the shoulder. And I'm thinking, oh, right, here we go then. tops he needs for the match. This must be me, because Sid's just absolutely walloped me in the shoulder. And what a character, you know. He was fantastic. And what I remember about Sid as well, one night at the City West Hotel in Dublin for the World Grand Prix, he didn't do this very often, but we went for a drink in the bar upstairs afterwards, and he just said he fancied it. Anyway, the drink started flowing, the Guinness was going down, and Sid Waddell, madcap character anyway, but with a few drinks in him, wow, couldn't understand a word he was saying, so he decided to ring his wife. So you can imagine how that conversation went. And the next morning, his wife rang Sid to check that he was okay, and he said, "Yeah, I'm okay. It was all Nigel Pearson's fault. He took me to the bar, he got me drunk." That's a load of nonsense. It wasn't my fault at all. He was up for a drink, but he blamed me, and I took one for the team. But great to be around, and what you saw and heard with Sid is what you got. And when he passed in 2012, I was deeply sad and devastated by it, because he welcomed me with open arms into that Sky Sports Darts team when I was a bag of nerves, and he was there. And, you know, I'll never forget the man, and I'll always regard it as a privilege and an honour to have worked with Sid and with Dave Lanning as well.
Both sorely missed, of course, but both legends and forever will be in the commentary box. And Dave Lanning, of course, I mean, that must have been something else, because he was the voice of Speedway and one of your childhood icons, no doubt.
Absolutely, and of course, Dave and I, we'd be in the press room at the Ali Pali or whatever, and all Dave Lanning wanted to talk about was Speedway. I'm trying to do my preparation for a preliminary round game between a player from Hong Kong and a player from Singapore that I'd never heard of, and I'm trying to make notes about these players. And all Dave wanted to do was talk about when he was promoter at Eastbourne, at West Ham Speedway, and you know, his memories of a world final at Wembley, and which I loved. I absolutely loved. But I'm thinking, we're at the Alexandra Palace at the World Darts Championship, and all good old Dave wants to do is talk about Speedway, and it was remarkable in so many. And then, of course, the next morning in the hotel, breakfast. Mind if I join you, dear boy? I remember Los Angeles in '82, and I'm thinking, we're off again here. Speedway.
What a position to be in.
Yeah, brilliant. And I remember when the Las Vegas Desert Classic, I went over to work for Sky on 3 of those. And the one trip, I brought my wife with me. I paid for her airfare and all the rest of it. And Dave invited us out for breakfast. And Dave, in the Mandalay Bay, Dave Lanning paid for mine and my wife Kerry's breakfast. And we had a lovely hour and a half with Dave. What a gentleman. And really enjoyed that. And things like that I'll never forget as well, Ian.
Absolutely fantastic stories and fantastic memories, of course, as well. This is the Humans of Speedway podcast. I'm Ian Brannan, and I'm in conversation with not just any human of Speedway, it is the voice box of Speedway in Britain and in the GPs, Nigel Pearson, who you welcome into your homes on a regular basis. And Nigel has seen many tracks around the world and around Europe as part of his job commentating on these great fixtures. But now it's time for him to put all of that knowledge into creating his Speedway Paradise, where we want to come up with the ultimate Speedway event, the ultimate track inside the great stadium that's going to bring that atmosphere, and also 2 teams facing each other that you just cannot miss from any era in time. So we'll work through it, and Nigel will start off. Which track out of all your experience are you going to pick for this?
Right, well, the track has got to be the National Speedway Stadium track at Bellevue. I absolutely love that track. There's so many different racing lines, and, you know, every meeting at Bellevue is better than the World Final at Wembley in '81, without a doubt. The track, they nailed it. Chris Morton, David Gordon, they nailed the design of that track, and fair play to them.
They wanted to create something similar to Hyde Road, didn't they? And I think they certainly achieved it.
Well, I saw them regularly at Grand Prix meetings, you know. They came to Torren, David and Chris, who were the promoters at Bellevue at the time. And, you know, I'm not going to go over old ground about, unfortunately, what happened in the end. And there's good people in charge of Bellevue now, great people. But they went on fact-finding missions. And as the years went on, they got ridiculed. Oh, David Gordon and Chris Morton are here. It must be a jolly up. No, actually, they took a bit of Torren and they took a bit of Hyde Road and mixed that in for the design of the National Speedway Stadium. And they got the track absolutely bang on. And every meeting there is superb, and I love going there.
But you know what Torren's based on?
Oh, you know, that's a loaded question. You know the answer. So they've got banked, They're quite banked, so you're not going to tell me Odsal or Halifax, are you?
Bradford, yeah.
Oh, you know more than me. Well done. Listen, you learn something new every day. Fair play. A bit of Odsal in Torren, Poland.
Yeah, Per Jonsson was consulted when they were designing the new track at Torren. He's a massive Torren legend, is Per Jonsson, but of course won the World Championship in Bradford, 1990. We were both there. So I guess he has a fondness for Odsal.
The only thing with Torren, though, Ian, is you can't get a pint of Tetley's bitter like you could at Odsal.
Ah, you see, you can't have everything. All right, so with that in mind then, what stadium would that track go in?
I'm going to I'm going to go for an old-style stadium, purely for sentimental reasons. And I'm going to go Wembley Stadium with the Twin Towers and the Royal Box, the old Wembley. We'll have the Bellevue track in the old Wembley Stadium. How about that?
7 riders going up to the Royal Box to claim their prize.
And the brass band marching across the centre green before the meeting. National anthem before the start. And Abide With Me, the cup final song. Oh, yes.
It brings a tear to your eye. On to the big question then. Your ultimate team. Your ideal 1 to 7, alive or dead, past or present, no points limits. Over to you.
Number 1, Ivan Major.
Oh,
Number 2, Eric Gunderson. Yeah, this is a great question. I might as well just reel off 7 riders that I've loved watching down the years. Ivan Major, Eric Gunderson, who was a hero. I'm going to say Darcy Ward thrilled us magnificently during his relatively short career. Natural on a speedway bike. I'm going to say Ty Woofenden, obviously. There's 4. I need another one from the 80s, really, to balance it up. So, Hans Nielsen, grudgingly loved watching him ride, even though he was always in opposition to Eric and in opposition to Cradley. But what a rider, the professor of his profession, Hans Nielsen. I got 2 left, so I've got to go for either Greg or Billy. And I think purely because Billy wasn't quite so good at gating as Greg, I'm going to go Billy for entertainment. And then I have to include this man, because he will absolutely slaughter me if I don't. Kelvin Tatum, MBE.
Well, it would be Speedway out of the top draw, so it's got to be done. And he can bring the dirtometer. But a lineup of legends there.
It's not bad. It might be expensive on the wage bill, though, Ian.
That's not a concern, though. Don't worry about it. Somebody else is picking up the tab.
That sounds good to me. I always like it when somebody else picks up the tab.
Don't we all? So in your experience, then, of watching GPs and so on, who would be the ideal ref?
I think right up there in my time watching Speedway. I mean, I've worked with some referees in my announcing days, in announcers' boxes at Cradley, Wolverhampton, Sheffield. I thought Paul Ackroyd was a very good referee who's now in charge of the Benevolent Fund. I thought that Graham Reeve was a good referee. Graham Brodie back in the day, top referee, handled meetings very well. But I think, looking at more modern referees, if you like, I think Christer Gardell of Sweden is very good. But I think overall I would have to say Tony Steele. He did a lot of Grand Prix meetings. He's a very calm, measured individual. Seems to make the right decisions on a regular basis. So the referee for my all-time meeting to commentate on would be Tony Steele.
He's a popular choice.
Is he? Yeah, I thought he might be. Very cool, very measured, very calm. But I'm convinced his hair is a perm. It's not natural, that. He won't have it, but it's definitely a perm.
Well, maybe we should get him on a future episode, and maybe that could be my first question.
Nigel Pearson reckons, and he's no expert on hairstyles, by the way, Nigel Pearson.
For riders, I've said who would be their ideal pit crew for this event. But I guess for you, if you're going to be in the commentary box, it'd be who would be your ideal co-commentator. But of course, you've got to remember, you've picked Kelvin in your team, so he's working already.
Yeah. Oh, crikey, I've just ruled him out of the commentary box, haven't I?
Awkward.
Look what I've done there. Right. Okay, so Kelvin, in between his races, will be available for analysis in the pits. Pits reporter, Sophie Blake or Steve Brandon or Natalie or anyone down in the pits, they can go to Kelvin in between his heats for analysis. So sat by me in the commentary box, it would have to be Steve Johnston, Jono. Such a fun character. commentated with him quite a lot when he was over here in the Grand Prix era, went on Grand Prix trips with Steve. This was before Kelv did every one. And Jono was never a world champion, but he had a good career, and he is one of life's characters. Absolutely great fun to be with. I've got to say, Jan Steckman, very measured, very calm, very intelligent in the way he describes action. And I think he deserves a mention as well. I think Dave Rowe and Sam do a good job on Eurosport as well, so fair play to them. But I think overall, for the fun element, because it's all about trying to provide a bit of fun to the viewer as well and provide the enjoyment factor, I'll have to go Steve Jono Johnston.
Here's your next one then, and you've obviously had experience of being a promoter and being a commentator, but what would be the first rule you would change if you got your hands on that rule book?
Ooh, I'm very frustrated, a bit like Kelvin, and we sound like a stuck record. I'm very frustrated by the amount of restarts in modern-day Speedway. And I just feel that maybe one area to cut this out, if a rider gambles and gets a flyer, then let him go. You know, it's part and parcel. It'll even itself out. If a rider decides to gamble, he may touch the tapes. Stick to tape touching only. If a rider touches the tapes, he's out. Full stop. Any movement or anything like that, if a rider gambles, let him gamble. All part of the fun. 1 week it'll work for you, the next week it'll work against you. Maybe, yeah, I can understand why you've got to ask all 4 riders to sit still at the start. But look, to cut out these constant red lights and restarts, which cause frustration, and they all go back to the pits and the mechanics come out and not all referees put the 2 minutes on straight away. Maybe just let them have a gamble at the start, and if they hit the tapes, they're out. And if not, they're lucky and off they go.
I think an interesting thing that Scott Nichols mentioned in a previous episode of this series was holding a bike still at the start, especially on like temporary tracks as well, where the bike's wanting to move. And, you know, from a fan's point of view, it can be easier said than done to hold a bike still.
Yeah, I can accept that because I'm not a rider, and I get what Scott was saying there. Totally understand that. So maybe, you know, that backs up what I'm saying. If you touch the tapes, you're out. And if you take a gamble and you get away with it, good luck to you.
And the final question then, who would be the opposition? Now, this can be any team in their full state from any time in history, any league in the world. Who's going to be the opposition for this Nigel Pearson 1-7 All-Star team?
We'll go Cradley 83, right? And we will replace Eric Gunderson at number 3 with Darcy Ward as a guest. How's that?
Sounds like a fair swap.
Darcy at number 3, Simon Wigg 1, Lance King 2, Darcy Ward at 3, Phil Collins 4, Alan Graham 5, Jano Pedersen and Peter Rawn at reserve. How's that?
It does sound like the dream team. If only we could get it to happen, but in the meantime, we can imagine it in our minds. Great
questions, Ian, and great to discuss things like this during this time. You know, it's a bit of fun. You know, Kelvin and I having a great time doing a podcast ourselves as well. So unashamed plug for that. And thanks for your kind comments on that as well. Jason Doyle as a guest. We've got Jono lined up, Steve Johnston. We're talking to Rick Miller as well in California very soon. We've got other guests lined up. So these podcasts I think are brilliant. Yours as well is different because it's humans in Speedway. I think that's a great element of it. And I think during this time where there is no Speedway, it's fantastic. And to have somebody like yourself doing it is excellent.
Oh, no, not at all. And thank you for your support too. It's greatly appreciated. And good luck with your own podcast. And thanks for sharing your stories too about how you found your way into broadcasting and giving us your ultimate Speedway fixture. It's been great to hear that. And most of all, though, we hope that we can hear you back on the TV at the side of a Speedway track very soon.
Yes, and let's hope that the situation allows us to do so. The promoters are making all the right noises, but of course it all boils down to what the government say, where we are with the situation. And fingers crossed we do, because I miss it badly. And I'll tell you what, Ian, I look forward to meeting up with you at some stage. One of the northern tracks maybe, or Cardiff even. We'll meet up, we'll have a beer and we'll have a chinwag.
Sounds good, and I'll certainly hold you to that. It's been really great chatting. Thanks to Nigel Pearson for joining me on this episode of the Humans of Speedway podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. Of course, check out the other episodes if you haven't heard them yet. And don't forget to give us a rating and subscribe so you get future episodes straight to your device. Plus, if you'd like to leave us a comment or suggest names you'd like to hear on the podcast, it'd be great to hear from you too, and we'll see what we can do. Meanwhile, see you next time on Humans of Speedway.
Sports Social Podcast Network.